I'm delighted to say the next session is, of course, about the new era for travel management. And we're going to be joined by Marcus Eklund, who is Global Managing Director of FCM Travel. Marcus, how are you doing?
Hi, Scott. I'm doing all right. What about yourself?
Great to see you. I was really hoping to see you in person today, but thank you again for your flexibility.
Well, these are the times we live in, so just glad to see you here again. But I was looking forward to see you guys in person as well last week.
It's great. So look, this session is essential. The TMC sits in such an important role in the center of everything that's going on, as usual, in the business travel industry. And we're going to be talking today about how the TMC is evolving and managing the return, and how on earth you build back the workforce, the skill and the talent to move on from the great pause that we've had here. So we're looking forward to getting into the topic. You're in the office today by the looks of it.
Yeah, we're kind of wrapping up actually. I'm literally the last one leaving, I think, for the office. So that's the collecting the mail for everybody and making sure no one does anything they shouldn't do in office. So that's pretty much the last week we're going to have the offices open.
Fantastic. You're going to clean things up on your way out as well, Marcus?
Exactly.
So tell us, at FCM, I know you guys spend a lot of time thinking about what the future holds, and what are you expecting travel to be like, and how will it be different going forward, and how are you going to be supporting our travelers accordingly?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, if I had the full answers, then I'm sure I'd be a millionaire by now for these things. But obviously, there's a few things we can see. I mean, obviously, we have seen a big return to travel in the last year, and we believe in 2022 and beyond, the return to travel will continue. So a bit of a growth back to that, not to the same level, but more importantly, we're going to have this kind of stop and start environment, which you guys can see today. I think only this morning, France have announced some new regulations for our UK travelers, and I think we can expect that to continue in 2022. But it's a very strong positive trend that people want to get back on the road and see each other again. But with that also comes additional responsibilities and how we can support them, how cooperation can support our travelers as well, actually, for this. So we don't believe travelers are going to be back to the same levels by any means in next year, but we do believe we're going to have a strong positive trend for people getting back to meet each other, both on the event side and on the traditional transit side.
Oh, we certainly hope so. I mean, when we were planning this session, Marcus, of course, nobody knew the term Omicron, and here we are again in a different situation. So we today want to look mainly going forward, but if I just briefly think backwards about the initial stages of the pandemic, it seems so long ago now, and the hard decisions that as a TMC you had to make at those times to make sure that you were going to be strong for the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a situation we probably don't want to live ever again for these things. But as I said a couple of times, we really looked at it when this happened. How can we deal with this from a long-term basis? We never thought it's going to be a short-term thing. And we did a couple of things, all based on priority. How can we support our customers and how can we support our people? So first of all, we went to make sure we have sufficient funding. So we raised a bit more money on the market, which means that we have still today a runway which is more than 2 years, even with zero trading. So it's very positive to do this. The second one was, of course, to make sure that we can continue to support from a service perspective, but also support our new customers coming in there as well. So we kept all our account management staff, we kept implementations up and running for these things as well. And obviously, we make sure the service levels were met for the customers who need that during this level as well. The third item we did, though, was also to see actually what is the kind of company we want to be moving out of this. And I think the only positive thing, if I put it that way, with this pandemic has been we had a bit more time and actually think about the strategic aspect, but we also have taken more time to invest and actually double down on investment in technology, in new service models and new capabilities to the corporations as well. So the silver lining is that I truly feel that coming out of this, we have more capabilities and we have a better technology and offering than we had going into COVID.
I think we'll definitely return to that theme of the service model. In our trending survey, Marcus, we asked questions again about the appetite for that from buyers. But thinking about, about the way that you managed to maintain your teams and retain those talents, I guess many organizations made use of things like furlough, which no longer exists. But how on earth did you retain the skills and talent that we're going to need to handle this complexity when travel returns?
Yeah, no, it was probably the hardest time we ever done, and I would lying to say that we could keep everybody, make everybody happy. Obviously, we had made some very tough decisions. Sorry, we have to reduce the workforce as well for these things. But we know in FCM we have a very strong culture. We really believe in our culture and our people, and that have helped us to keep us together. So even if a lot of people doubted in the industry, we managed to say, actually, we are here as a team. We will get out of this as well. So we managed to keep that strong culture for the people who stayed on board for these things and show that there is a future within travel, which again is proven to be right as well. So I'm very happy about this. The second we've done as well was trying to deal and keep in contact with as many people as possible of the people who was on furlough. So we created a lot of alumni networks. We created different communication channels to be able to reach them out and making sure that when travel picks up again, if they want to, we would love to welcome them back. And it's been one of the key successes we have at the moment to be able to welcome people back as well when when travel has actually started to grow again as well. So that has been a positive part, but obviously it was a heavy impact that we had during the COVID.
So interesting. You know very well, Marcus, one of my passion points is culture, people culture in business, and that retention, the way you're able to keep people engaged and informed along the way, that's going to be a competitive differentiator, I think, going forward when travel returns, to see which TMCs can turn to their people again.
We strongly believe that as well, Scott. I mean, it used to be that issuing an airline ticket was complicated. You needed skills to do that. That is very much a commonplace today, right? But what people actually contributes to is service aspect. They contribute to a passion to the industry, but also that's how we can actually come up with new ideas and evolve the industry as well. And as you know, Scott, we're very passionate about that within FCM and in Flights into Travel Group overall. And that's something which I think you can see that actually rejuvenation coming back into the business right now as travel kicks up again as well. So we look quite positive in the future, actually.
And I wonder, thinking about the TMC sector a little bit more widely, Marcus, do you think in general the sector is ready and it has the people and the capability that it will need?
Absolutely not. I think it's quite easy to say that what the travel landscape was before is not what it's going to be as well. And you have a couple of factors. First of all, this kind of stop and start environment, which we have all the time, and a lot of the, provider impact that has, I don't think anybody has been fully ready for this yet. So we're gearing up. And I think a lot of TMCs who are very good people, they will also be able to gearing up. So from that perspective, I think the industry has the capabilities to adopt with the new environment for these things. But also the second trend is obviously there's much more digitalization, there's much more innovation going on in this space. And that's where we see some new players in the industry, which I fully embrace. I think it's great to have a bit more challenger in the industry as well. But equally, I think some of the traditional TMCs with a very traditional model will struggle in this aspect as well, because the travelers' need in the future is going to be much more enhanced, both digitally, but also, again, how can a TMC support this agile and flexible environment going forward? So yeah, I don't think TMC are ready as an environment, but I think we have players in the industry with very good people who will make sure that they are ready for the future.
It's such a good point you make, Marcus, about when we talk about having the people skills to return, technology has a huge part to play, because that crossover, it needs to help take the strain, doesn't it? And I know that that's something that you firmly believe at FCM.
Absolutely. But I give the recent example, which I'm based in London, which most people here in UK, but I give a recent example where UK imposed restrictions for South African travelers for these things. With all the technology in the world, we could notify a lot of people to say, actually, there's an issue with your flight, but it didn't give any comfort to people. We needed service behind this to do this. The second of all, there was no alternative flights. Flights got cancelled for these things. So with all the good technology in the world, you just don't want a banner to say there's no alternative flights. You want to have and know that someone is there, picking up the phone and making sure that actually they're monitoring this reservation if actually the new options available there. So we're trying to empower our consultants with technology and obviously give a better user experience through technology to our travelers as well. And that's really the core aspect of what we stand for and what we're trying to promote moving forward.
Good stuff. And we'll return to that theme of the booking tool, because it's certainly interesting to our buyers. Before we leave this subject of recovery, it seems, Marcus, that in a world where we're going to have people sadly getting sick from time to time, and that isolation is a new part of people's lives when they live with someone who is perhaps infected, do we all need to prepare to be a little bit more patient and understanding when it comes to consistent service delivery, not just in travel or business travel, but in life generally?
I do think so, actually. And if you look at these things, like I said, it's what we have experienced. And I think a lot of corporate buyers and corporate travel experience that for 18 months, our phones didn't ring. So for example, you had no phones ringing for this, and all of a sudden a border opening up and you have 1,000 calls a day. So you just have that, was a momentum when it comes to these things, which we love to have that activity back again. But from a service level, it's hard to plan. We're trying our best. We're up staffing in advance. We're trying to predict these trends. But I think in general, Scott, to your point, we probably need to be slightly more understanding of society. It's not an excuse, just to be clear, but actually people need to understand sometimes that the whole time maybe 5 minutes rather than the three calls that they're usually used to.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, and I hope we will remember that and have long memories, because we've all seen it in all parts of everyday life, no doubt. Marcus, when we entered the pandemic, we had a TMC fee model that couldn't really be less suited, could it, to the environment we're about to head into. What sort of challenges that presented? Obviously, we can imagine what they might be, but have you revisited the model with any success with customers?
Yeah, I think that the fee model not fit for purpose is probably today's understatement, at least from a TMC perspective, because no income is not funny. But yes, we have actually a lot of this. And I must say many corporations have been fantastic in terms of understanding this. There are certain corporations saying, actually, for the next 12 months, we don't need anybody to pick up the phone. Some of the smaller corporations say, okay, perfect. We don't have to do much for this. But most of our corporation have actually acknowledged that they need a service level, and they're happy to pay for a specific service as well. So we have revisited some of the models for this. I think it's more interesting to see moving on right now. There's a lot of good discussions about hybrid models. So I'm not sure that we're going to have a complete revolution in commercial models within the TMC business at the moment. But you see a lot of hybrid models coming out, which I think is a bit more fit for purpose in this new world for these things. Because no corporation wants to pay too much, but equally all corporations want to make sure that it's a base service and it's a support to the program during non-travel periods as well. So I think it's a very good discussion in the industry at the moment.
Good stuff. We'll share the results of what our buyers think in the survey when we share it at noon. But we talked just earlier about the importance of the booking tool in this recovery and how we're going to manage it jointly in partnership with our TMCs. What is FCM doing with its tool to get it ready for the return? And in general, I know at FCM you allow your customers to use other third-party booking tools as well. So what are you seeing in general there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what we did for this, one of the strategic investments we did throughout the pandemic was actually looking at the needs in the OBT's area. And we actually make our own acquisition in our own OBT, which we're launching in US and Canada as well, with the specific focus of much better user experience, but also fit for purpose in the modern world for these things. But it's not a global OBT. And obviously, as you know, in mentioned, Scott, we work with a lot of third-party OBTs. They have a lot of qualities. But how can we embrace them, and how can we actually enrich that experience when it's not sufficient? So the second part of investment we've done is really working on how can we augment an experience on Concur or on Cytric or on Circle, whatever third-party OBT. So we have actually those technical capabilities right now to, for example, give you a sustainability estimation on the different flights which appear on a Concur flight search page. And I think those kind of technology pieces is going to be very important, how we can help a third-party OBT not to take away the core competencies, but how can we augment that experience and enrich that based on some of these new needs. It allows us to be more agile, to be honest, and take away some of the pain points from these third-party OBTs.
Such an important area. I do feel it's going to be just an essential conversation as we start to build back. And as I say, we'll share the results about what our buyers think shortly. One of the other areas that we'll talk about in the survey is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Marcus, it's so important to us here at ITM and in the boardrooms of the companies that our buyers represent. But our survey actually shows how hard it is to incorporate initiatives around DE&I into travel policies and travel programs. Can TMCs help our buyers to do this? Because it seems to be very high priority, but very hard to do.
Yeah, it is difficult. And I mean, just as you're saying within ITM, FCM is equally, we are absolutely behind the diversity and sponsoring that to the highest degree. Speaking to corporations, I think the main thing we promote is the awareness part of it. The travel policies in general has been very much defined by hierarchies or cost centers within organizations. I think by diversity and equality, it really brings apart that there's individuals who's beyond just hierarchies. So for the travel manager to bring awareness that actually people have different needs within the organization, and therefore policies may have to differ for these things. So that's number one step. The second one, which we're looking to within travel programs, is to say, what are different providers, what are different measurements that you want to have into your program, but then fulfill some of these different needs with both the diversity and equality actually needs to have in there as well. So it's a lot of these small details, but I think really can help the travel program and actually introduce and give more diversity into this program. If it's for female travelers, if it's for both older or younger, if it's travelers with specific needs, it should be as a seamless experience for any one of them to actually have a business trip, an end-to-end journey, as it is for the traditional hierarchical traveler, if I put it that way.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, Marcus? And it seems much of it stems from the way that we have information in travel profiles, so we know who people are and what their specific needs will be. Otherwise, the guidance is too general, isn't it, sometimes, and we can't take care of people the way we want to. So information is so important in this, but sometimes sharing personal information can be a challenge in itself. So again, an industry problem that I know our buyers are talking to their TMCs about.
Yeah, and I think the main thing with our approaches is things that people should have the capability to share if they want to, and therefore we can assist further. But equally, obviously, privacy is a massive topic in the industry. If people do not want to share for also valid reasons for these things, we need to provide as good of a service as we can. But I think, again, coming back to corporations and the travel program, they need to have a bit of awareness and education around this because not many corporations have taken their doctrine and vision from a company perspective and actually updated the travel programs for this as well.
Yeah, it's exactly. Well put, Marcus, and we'll see the detail of that shortly in the survey. Of course, we just had a great presentation from Carrie at BA around sustainability, and it seems that a week doesn't go by without a supplier, an airline or a TMC announcing large initiatives, including around sustainable aviation fuel. Marcus, from your perspective, what do you think the most meaningful and beneficial projects will be in the coming year and beyond?
It's a very good part, I must say, and I love the presentation you had before in the chat before as well. I think a lot of travel we do is obviously depending on airlines, on the mode of transportation. And I think from an industry perspective, what the airline industry is trying to achieve and has to achieve is actually probably going to be the most important one. If it's around SAFs or if around some of these other initiatives they have, it's probably going to have the biggest impact on that. But on a travel management perspective, and broader part of this, I think it's also finding some of these guidelines, how we travel right. So I think it's also down to that behavior. So it's not a specific project per se, but I think it's going to come to these kind of travel right programs that are coming to within the travel programs. So making sure that obviously is essential to meet, essential to do these things, but how do you make sure you maybe take 3 trips instead of 4 trips for a year? And how do you make sure actually that you have the right behavior during this trip as well? So beyond that airline, let's say decarbonization and the net zero pledge they have been making, I think that the behavior aspect is going to be the biggest impact on industry.
So interesting, and it seems that there's almost 2 parts to this conversation, which is of course the need for us to protect our planet versus the value of meeting in person, which we all passionately believe in. And to me, it's part of the same conversation. We know we need to be together, so we need to learn as many lessons along the way. I think there'll be a lot of kind of crowdsource sharing best practice as we find better ways to travel, doing less harm. And I love the term treading lightly. So any ideas that we have to share with each other, how we can tread more lightly, if that's such a thing, everyone's going to want to hear.
Absolutely. And I think, take the pandemic as an example, a lot of research and companies actually started sharing research we had never done before. And I see sustainability within travel. I hope we can get to that same pathway. As I said, a very openness in terms of best practices, ideas, what is working, what is not working, because we're all here to benefit from any of these improvements for it. At the same time, said Scott, obviously the meeting in person will never fully go away, but how do we do it on the right level with the right behavior?
Absolutely, completely concur. So, Marcus, thinking more generally about the TMC industry, as much as we've seen many initiatives on sustainability announced in the news recently, it seems that most weeks there is a move made in consolidation in the TMC space as well. And I know that the model at FCM has always been a bit different. You focus very much on organic growth through sales. Is that likely to remain the plan at FCM? And what do you think of the consolidation that's taking place out there?
Look, for everybody who loves industry gossip, I think all this mergers consolidation, there are what everybody loves over a glass of wine. But no, on a serious note, it's interesting to see how the industry consolidates. And our thought behind this has always been that how do we keep our culture intact? How do we keep our service and quality of service to our customers? And how do we best invest actually what the money we have for these things? And we believe in our organic growth model. And that's what our customers told us so far. And we also believe in bringing customer on board on the right level for this, and therefore be able to bring the right level of services. We're going to stick with our growth model. We obviously are looking at more complementary acquisitions in an M&A space. Like I mentioned before, we've done a couple of technology investments, and we continue to do quite significant investment there as well. Because rather than to just acquiring, let's call it legacy agencies, I think this is where we can add value, and where the investment we're making will have a better return for our corporate travelers as well. So that's just overall for this. But for the consolidation, I think we're doing what the airline industry did about 10 years ago. I think big is going to get bigger in terms of consolidation for this. But what I think is a very nice counterbalance to this is also a couple of the startups coming up here as well. And those startups are different, I will say, motivation, attitude, and the more diversity we have in the industry, I think it's going to benefit the corporation and the corporate buyers. So we're going to stick with our model, and hopefully customers are going to vote with their heart for these things. And we obviously need to prove this. But it's interesting to see how the industry evolves. But I don't think it's going to be one big mammoth player ruling the world. I definitely think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the alternative business.
Whoops, I put myself on mute accidentally there, Marcus. Apologies. It almost seems to me like there'll be three segments going forward. There's the consolidating large players, there's the organic growth strong players, and then there's new entrants. It seems that there's never been more choice in many ways in the TMC space, which is a good thing. And we asked our buyers about the propensity to RFP going forward. And it seems like initially the intention seems to be a bit lower than the average year. But what we sometimes find is once we get into the year and events overtake, that there's more activity than was expected originally.
Yeah, I must say we have seen a surprisingly high activity during the last 12 months. And we do predict that the next 12 months is going to be even higher activity than that, just because a lot of travel programs have changed. A lot of the needs have changed, and a lot of traditional, and if you've been with the TMC for 20 years, you want to see what you can do differently in this world as well. So it's going to be interesting to see a bit how that market shifts a bit. And obviously COVID has impacted the existing players, some of the legacy TMCs, to a certain degree as well, which is also what we hear by other people looking for potentially new alternatives as well. But it's going to be an interesting time for the industry, and I'm just hoping that there's going to be some new exciting solutions as well for the customers and for the travelers.
And it's interesting. One of the things I hope on behalf of our TMCs is that where there is RFP activity, it's with the intention to be able to move if you want to, rather than benchmarking the market, which I know is something which our fantastic TMCs have to go through sometimes as well. Well, Marcus, it's been great fun to catch up. I can't wait to catch up in person because it's such interesting things you're doing there at FCM. So to sign us off, what do you think is going to lead to success in the TMC space going forward into next year, as much as we can know anything about next year?
Well, for me, it's very open. Our mantra is agility. I mean, we have between providing a great user experience despite all this friction and have the agility to adopt to that change in landscape 2022 is going to be the two key things. Because if there's one thing the last 18 months have taught us, is that we can't predict much. And therefore the agility part to react to these things, and again, supporting corporations and their policies, it's going to be the key thing for 2022 for us.
It's interesting. Some of us used to think that we knew what the future might bring. It's never been more uncertain, is it? And in many ways, we've got to see that as an opportunity, because it's up to the likes of our TMCs and everyone on this webinar meeting today. We can determine what the future looks like, because we're as expert as anybody out there.
Exactly. And as long as we have the right tools and capabilities and the right mentality for it, I'm sure it's going to be a good 2022.
Good stuff. Well, Marcus, I wish you a great festive period and a brilliant 2022. I suspect you're going to have one.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you very much, everybody.
Great to see you. Thanks, Marcus.